and welcome to another episode of Sleep Paralysis News. This is our safe space where we get to speak about sleep paralysis openly, non-judgmentally, within an audience which understands and shares exactly what we're talking about. I'm looking forward to today's episodes. I'm here with our guest and with Cyrus, our co-host here, where we're going to go straight into hearing Stella's experience with sleep paralysis that I must admit I'm looking forward to hearing all about. So, Stella, I'm going to hand over to you for you to tell us all about your sleep paralysis experiences.
Okay, I probably had some strange types of experiences as a child, which I expect a lot of people do. We hear a lot about children having this sort of thing when they're sort of half awake between sleep and waking up or before they're going to sleep. And I had a lot of that as a young child. So those experiences are very typical of what I've heard of other people, sort of feeling that I'm falling, feeling that people are calling my name, differences in altered perception. In my case, my eyes seemed to zoom in and out as if I was looking through a telescope and then through a microscope. I don't, I haven't really heard anybody else say that sort of thing, but it's all the sort of thing that happens when you're on the verge of sleep and waking. But my sleep paralysis experience happened this year, and this is why I was interested in talking to you about it, because there were two experiences about 2 weeks apart, and in both cases, they were after taking sleep medication. And I'm going to read out to you the names of the sleep medication because it might be interesting for your audience. So I'm in the UK, so this might come under another name in America, but the sleep medication is called Zopiclone.
Okay.
Zopiclone. That's one that was prescribed by my doctor. Okay. And the other one was a herbal sleep medication, which I just got from a local health shop, and it was just called Quiet Mind, and it contains lots of natural herbal things to do with sleeping. Nothing unusual, the sort of thing you'd see in any natural remedy.
Do you have the bottle there, Stella? Could you
Yeah,
show
I'll
us the
just read
bottle?
off some of the. Yeah,
For
I'll
the
just read off
herbal
some.
one, it would be interesting to see that.
This is the herbal one.
Okay.
That's the box it
Yeah.
comes in, and I'll read you out some of the ingredients. Apart from zinc and iodine and magnesium, it's got ashwagandha root, Morenci cherry fruit powder, amla berry fruit, piperine black pepper extract, rhodiola roses root extract, and Brahmi herb. So all those things are supposed to be good for sleeping. So that was one medication. And as I said, the other one was the one the doctor prescribed. And the reason I had them was because I was going through a very, very bad period of insomnia, which lasted 3 or 4 months. It was very, very bad. It was like couldn't get to sleep at all. And then maybe about 3 in the morning, I might finally get about 2 hours, So it was a really bad period of insomnia. The doctor and the chemist thought it had been brought on by stress because I've had 2 years of weight loss, where I've been losing weight seriously so that I can maintain a healthy weight. And they thought it might be that I'd been through such a long period of sustained weight loss that might have stressed me out a lot, and that might have caused the insomnia. So that was the only explanation they had. So I tried these two different medications, and the first one, the herbal one, is the one I tried first, and it worked straight away the very first night I tried it. And in the morning, as I was just about to wake up, I had it's like, when you have a kind of lucid dream where you're dreaming, or you're trying to wake up, so it's a kind of nightmare and you're struggling to wake up, but I felt that I was wide awake. So it was very much like what other people have described. I felt that there was nobody in the room with me, by the way, and I was sleeping up against a wall, so there was no possibility of any other person in the room. And I felt the physical presence of another human being in the bed beside me on the side that the wall was. So that was impossible, obviously, physically impossible. But a heavy presence, a pressure of somebody's body as if they were sleeping behind me, beside me on the bed. I heard their breathing, very harsh breathing. And it was pretty frightening, to be honest. It was frightening. It was like the kind of nightmares I had when I was a child, actually, you know, where you want to run away and you can't, you know. I wouldn't say I had a lot of pressure on my chest breathing or anything like that. I couldn't move and I was struggling to get away from this presence. When I'd eventually woken up from it, it took me quite a few minutes to recover because I thought it was so real. And because a few years ago I escaped from domestic violence, my mind had instantly gone to that person, because to me it had sounded like his breathing and that he had trapped me. You know, I was trapped in the domestic violence situation at the time. So your mind immediately leaps to a paranormal explanation. Let's face it, everybody's mind does, right? So I got over that and I thought, well, it must have been some horrible bad dream that I was struggling to wake up from. So I put those herbal medication to one side and I went to the doctor, explained to the doctor about all the insomnia. She was very sympathetic. She gave me this zopiclone, which you only take one little pill the night when you're going to go to sleep. She advised not take it too regularly, don't get addicted to it. You know, she was really good. And I didn't. In fact, I had 28 pills, and here's the box. I'll put it in front of the camera, if I can. Where's the camera? Here we are. It might be reversed, but it says zopiclone.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah. So 28 pills, and I've still got loads of them left. So I agreed with her that all it was like an emergency solution to the insomnia, was just to have one or two of these. So that very night I took one of these, and the same thing happened the next morning. I had a very, very similar hallucination, although this time it was worse because this time I felt somebody's heavy arm across me like that, as if they were holding me down in the bed. And again, I heard the harsh breathing. So it was very, very similar to the one only a couple of days before. And I think because it was the second time I'd had it, I was fighting against it and saying, this isn't real. I know this isn't real. Go away, you know? Get out of my get out of my life, you know? And I knew that I thought that it was my ex-abuser, who is dead, by the way. He died about a year and a half ago, right? So I knew this was all impossible in my sane part of my mind, you know. But when you're in an experience like that, you are not thinking straight, really. You automatically pin it on what it seems to be like, right? And I could literally see a heavy man's arm holding me across my chest like that, as if they were lying behind me and pinning me down, right? Very, very weird, very vivid, very weird. The noise of the breathing and everything. And that really frightened me from using these pills again. It frightened me from using them again. But what I found was that when I took another one, the following evening, it didn't happen. It only happened the very first day I took both of these medications. It hasn't happened since. And the doctor was quite right that by being very careful with this medication, it was able to kind of kickstart me back into sleeping a more normal sleep pattern again. So I haven't needed to have anything like this since then. And I use other methods now if I'm finding difficulty in sleeping. Chamomile tea, this sort of thing, not having coffee after midday, all the normal things to help you sleep, you know. So The interesting thing about the Zopiclone is that I spoke to somebody who's had it in the past, prescribed to them, because they had mental health problems, and that gave them difficulty sleeping. And they said, yeah, that gave them hallucinations as well. Now, I know that's only anecdotal. I know it's only me and this other friend that I have, but I found that extremely interesting because everything I've ever read and heard about sleep paralysis is all very similar. It's all about a presence in the room with you, or something pressurizing you, stopping you moving, holding you down in the bed. And some people have visions like, maybe they call it a little demon or something, And this goes back way into history, as I'm sure you two guys know. There's loads of stuff about sleep paralysis, hallucinations, and there's loads of stuff on the internet about modern explanations for it as well. But I just thought I'd like to come on and say the point about a lot of children having these experiences, people thinking back when they're adults to when they were children and thinking, oh, yes, I had that sort of thing. I saw a strange presence standing in the corner of my room and I couldn't move and I was terrified. A lot of children have that. Now, in Britain, and I don't know about America, but in Britain, there's a very popular children's sleep medication called Calpol. And this has been popular with parents for 30 odd years. It goes back a long way, Calpol. It's a mild sedative. Loads of parents give their children this to help them sleep. Now, my experiences with the sleep medication, I'm seriously wondering how much of this, especially with children, because that's where we hear the most about this kind of experience, is down to using substance to help you get to sleep, some substance or other. So although my experience was very frightening, I'm quite confident it isn't going to happen again because to me, it was the result of taking these medications.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not trying to pour cold water on everybody else's experience that has talked to you. And I fully understand why people jump to the paranormal because I immediately thought it was my abuser who I knew to be dead.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I hear that in common with many sleep process experiencers, and I think what it comes down to is like your subconscious mind knows your biggest fear. And so when sleep paralysis happens, it taps into your biggest fear. So someone's biggest fear might be spiders, someone's biggest fear might be demons, ghosts, aliens. Your deepest fears seem to be a domestic partner that was mistreating you. And so your subconscious knew that. So, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. What should I be afraid of? I don't know how to make sense of it. It must be something that I felt fear from before. So everyone's experience is different. And that's why that's interesting. So yeah, you're actually a very interesting experiencer because you're telling us something that is not like a ghost or an alien or a demon, and you're adding medication in there as well. I used to be on Ambien when I was in college. Boy, oh boy, that's a hallucinogen. I'll tell you. So these drugs are messing with our chemical makeup as we sleep. So I'm glad you shared that with us.
I would like to say to both of you that I've had other so-called paranormal experiences which weren't the result of medication of any kind because I don't smoke, I don't take weed or anything like that. But I've had a UFO experience, and I've been on a podcast called the UFO Chronicles, which is in Britain, a British podcast, and that wasn't to do with any medication or anything. So I'm not pouring cold water on people's experiences. There are lots of stuff happening to people, and there could be loads of different explanations for some of it, But there's a lot of researchers in Britain who are starting to tie all this together and saying, well, maybe it's all part of the same phenomena,
Yeah, and I think that's what I was going to say. I wouldn't kind of gloss over the UFO experience and the sleep paralysis experience. I mean, I see there's a lot of crossover between the two, and sleep paralysis experiencers are talking to me that they've seen UFOs, that they've engaged with the entities. They see the signs in the sky, and they are communicating actively with extraterrestrials. So the sleep, it's almost as though the sleep paralysis state doesn't just affect you when you're sleeping. It's almost as though there's something unique about you, which means that whilst you're awake, you can equally tap in to other types of phenomena that is going on, whether it be extraterrestrial related or whether it's some other kind of psychic thing where you see things or know things or hear things. There's something else going on as well. But I always, when people speak to me about the hallucinatory kind of aspect of sleep paralysis, I always say, why is it that it's the same images that we see? Why are we all? How do you get around that? How does the mind manage to see or imagine the same things for people across the world?
Yeah,
Are
you're
we
actually.
tapping
Oh,
into something? Are we tapping into something really? And I'm open to the possibility, that yes, we are, especially with the way how the experience feels so real. It's as real as I'm talking to you now, the sleep paralysis experience. And the memory of that just doesn't fade. It just stays with you throughout your
that's
life.
Well, I'm early retired now, and I've actually found it very interesting to start exploring all this, to look back at what I had when I was a child, and the strange things that I've experienced as I've been a bit older. And it's almost like we have a common language all over the world, and the common language, instead of being a vocal language, is a language of images. And people are seeing the same kind of images, and then depending on what culture they grew up in, give it different names. And that
Very interesting.
it could really be that there is something that this is. I've started to think that this is an evolutionary thing, that there is an actual reason why it happens. Well, first of all, I've always thought that nightmares have an evolutionary reason, because a nightmare has the function of waking you up. Okay, because it's always the last thing you remember when you're in the deep sleep. You're abruptly waken out of it by the nightmare, and the nightmare could have been triggered by a noise outside. So this could be an evolutionary thing to wake you up from danger, right? So I've always thought that about nightmares, but with the sleep paralysis, you've got the added thing that it's making you freeze in one place. Now that again could be evolutionary, so that you don't make a noise and attract the predator in. Do you see what I mean? So there could be a reason why we have these things.
Well,
Yeah,
we do
along
know
with
that. Sorry,
acting
go
out
on.
your
Sorry.
dream. Well, along with acting out your dreams, because if you
Mm-hmm.
aren't paralyzed when you're in that dream state that seems so vivid, that you will be a sleepwalker and you will fall off the edge of your bed and jolt yourself awake. So I think that sleep paralysis is a way for us to restore our minds in the deepest state of, REM, or whatever stage of sleep that is deepest for us to renew our minds. And so we probably wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't go through sleep paralysis. We wouldn't get that deep of sleep. We would stay in that stage 1, stage 2 of sleep and never really feel fully rested when we woke up. So I see sleep paralysis as a way to make sure that our minds are restoring itself. And then sometimes we have a phenomenon when your spirit is detached from your body and your body's trying to wake up and your spirit's not connected yet. What's going on? That's the mystery of it all.
Well, yeah, and I mean, like a lot of other people, I've had a variety of experiences. And again, a lot of it was when I was young, things like seeing myself outside my body and stuff like that. And maybe it's all part of the same ability that we all have. So, like you've just said, Cyrus, it could be like to help us in some way, or to keep us safe from danger. But I don't think that so many people would have this ability or have this tapping into this if it wasn't of any use. If it didn't have any evolutionary use, because if this made you vulnerable, well, we wouldn't have survived. Those of us who have these experiences wouldn't have survived, right? So there has to be a use for it. Now, as I'm an artist, I feel that it's very much tied to creativity, human creativity, because if you can put yourself back before the internet, which is hard, I know, but put yourself back before the internet when movies were just movies and people had to make the effort to go out to the cinema to see them. But even back before that, when you read a book by a really good writer, and I'm going to pick The Lord of the Rings because everybody knows that book, why is it that everybody sees the same images that Tolkien was literally writing about? And I'm going way back before the Lord of the Rings films. For years and years, a bookshop called Waterstones used to do an opinion poll of everybody's favourite book in England. Lord of the Rings was always number one. And all the literary people looked down their noses at this because they thought, oh, this is just like lower class, it hasn't really got that much literary merit, and it's just, do you know what I mean? Because it was a big popular book. But the thing is, you could talk to somebody casually about it, and they were seeing in their mind the exact same images that Tolkien was talking about that you saw in your mind. Now, you could just say that's because he was just such a good writer, but I don't really think that's true. I think there's something, because I illustrate books for writers. That's one of the things I do. Is and there's a real connection that is going on between you and the writer. They're not just hiring you to do a job. There's a real connection going on where they are putting into your mind the image of what they want to see, and then they want you to draw it. Do you see what I mean? And I think a lot of the imagery and the hallucinations are to do with human creativity. I think we are, and it's important that we investigate it and find out more about it and how it all works.
Yeah,
so
that's a great point.
Some kind of mass consciousness that we're on some plane, we're all thinking the same thought, and that's creating this image. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I suppose an old word for it was telepathy, I suppose. That it's possible to put the images of what you're thinking about into somebody else's head, and I think that's what creative people do. I think that's what they actually do. I think that's why things like movies and books are so much part of our world, and this goes right the way back to cave paintings. I mean, we obviously got something out of this. Creativity isn't just a waste of time. It's something we do to bring enjoyment to everybody and to ourselves and to our people around us. And could it all be part of the same abilities of our brain that produce these hallucinations? That's just what I'm saying. That's just my thoughts.
So where do you think it comes from? Where do you think it comes from?
Well, I think we're never, ever going to get to the root of what the human brain is all about. I don't think neuroscientists have got a handle on it. They won't have a handle on it for hundreds of years. All the stuff they say about AI is all nonsense. Actually, it's all. I know your audience are going to say, "What is she going on about?" But here in Britain, we've got quite an anti-transhumanist movement going on, and I've talked quite often to a lady who is a professor of AI and robotics. So I'm not talking just out of the blue here. There's a lot of it is hype. A lot of the stuff around AI is hype, and I prefer to use the word automata when I hear people talking about AI and robots, because I really don't think them, apart from the fact that we're using modern materials like plastic and graphene and stuff, we're not really much further along from the automata of the Victorian era, as much as they would like to fool us that we are, and as for artificial intelligence, we don't even know what our own intelligence is all about yet. So how can we possibly say that we're going to imitate it? We don't even know what our intelligence is about.
I think that one thing, though, that I'd like to hear about before we end is your extraterrestrial experience, because you mentioned that. Would you like to talk us through that?
Well, your audience, they can Google the UFO Chronicles podcast, and it was edition number 240 on that podcast. So it is all on there. But it was in the daytime. It was during the day on a Sunday afternoon in my own city, up in a big park, which is about 3 square miles, which is quite well known in Bristol, called the Clifton Downs, near the Clifton Suspension Bridge. And I had this experience of seeing an unidentified object in the sky, which I felt throughout the experience I was in a kind of hallucinatory state, sort of trance. And that, I believe, was caused because I was coming back from a walk of about 3 miles over the downs and back. So I was under low-level stress, you know, and I think walking is a rhythmic thing that can put you into a bit of a trance. And I saw this thing in the sky, which first of all I thought it was a big bird, but we don't have big birds as big as that in our country, you know. And I didn't know what it was. I fixated on it, and as I walked across on my route home, the thing kept pace with me in the sky, kind of followed me along. And I felt terribly embarrassed because I was the only person staring up at this thing and not a single other person. And there was loads of people about. Nobody was looking up at it, you know. Everybody was walking along, looking at their phones or, you know, doing all the things they've been doing, you know, cars driving along. And there was nobody. I was the only person looking up at this thing. And I decided to go off the path onto a bit of grass where I'd be more away from other people, because I felt pretty stupid, actually, staring up at it. And it seemed to then be almost right above me, and I made the estimate that it was about the size of a small bus, like a mini bus. And I reckoned it was about 150 feet up. It was higher than a nearby office block, which was about 4 stories high. And it seemed to, at that point, to be right above me. It was roughly in the shape of, a lot of people would say a kind of saucer shape, but to me it was more like a bird with its wings outstretched, like a wooden bird that you see on top of a totem pole, but without a head, so with just the wings really outstretched. I was right underneath it at that point. And then the really bizarre part about this was that I saw a couple of tiny little, like little blinky LED lights coming down from it on a couple of wires, which that was the point that snapped me out of it, to be honest. I thought, no, this is a bit more than just, I didn't know what was going on. Nobody around me seemed to notice it. And that kind of snapped me out of it because it was too weird. So I carried